I've seen killers that have killed in the heat of passion. I've seen killers who have immediately regretted their actions. I've seen killers that were gangbangers. Yes, here's some of the nicknames of some of the people I encountered. Hazard, Ruthless, Monster. You'd never think you could learn from people like Ruthless or Hazard.
What did you learn?
It's a unique way to navigate the world. The unique perspective is I can do that and then come home and play Mario Kart for an hour with my babies. And you can't stop living the rest of your life. I built that resilience early in my life. I had a great uncle that lived across the street, and his name was Godfrey. He had polio, and it left him a paraplegic. Here's a guy who was left to walk with braces, who depended on his arms to get him up and down everywhere he went. But it was getting to a point where he was giving up. Every day he would tell me, I'm gonna kill myself. But seeing that as a young man, seeing how unfair life can be, like when I'm sitting across from a big shot lawyer from Philadelphia, I think, you went to Harvard, congratulations. I went to Uncle Godfrey's school. I know life can be unfair. And that lesson, that's what changed me. So I sat down to take the bar exam, and there's a digital clock on the screen, and it said, the Pennsylvania bar exam will begin in 2 minutes. So I said a quiet prayer to my uncle, and I said, I never asked you for anything. Get me through this, and I'll take care of people like you.
It still hits, I don't miss it. It's go, 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 like a go-go flow. And I'm almost done, and I told you so. When I throw these flows, like it's Rochambeau. And I ain't too close, it's Joe Smo goes. And I'm on my grind, that is all the time. I do not do breaks, that's right, I stay in dry. And look, I'm back with a little bit of that, and a little more cash than it came in with. Ready, that cat is out that bad, but I still ask you, the boy got skills. I don't need her, I don't need him, I don't need help with me, I got this. I can sing songs, I can spit raps, and I can do both, even do this, word.
This episode is brought to you by Anthracite Pallet Solutions. Need reliable, durable pallets to keep your business moving? At Anthracite Pallet Solutions, we specialize in new and used 48x40 wooden pallets. Whether you're shipping, storing, or stacking, we offer high-quality pallets that keep your operations running smoothly. With our own fleet of trucks and trailers, we deliver on time, every time. And if warehouse space is a concern, our drop trailer services have you covered. From custom orders to large-scale deliveries, we're here to meet your every need with top-notch customer service and unbeatable prices. We're currently shipping within 2 hours of Scranton, Pennsylvania, including Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Maryland. Call us today at 570-606-9206 or inquire online at anthracitepallet.com and let us handle your pallet solutions. Anthracite Pallet Solutions, built to last, designed to move. This episode is brought to you by Sweat Tent, the pioneers of the portable wood-burning sauna. Did you know that using the sauna 3 to 4 times per week could reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease by up to 50% and make you 60% less likely to experience Alzheimer's disease? That's why I've been a big fan of the sauna for years. But having to go to a crowded gym to do it isn't ideal. And all the at-home options are bulky and expensive. That's why I only use the Sweat Tent for my sauna needs. It's the most storable and affordable wood-burning sauna on the market. It not only takes minutes to set up, but it can reach 200 degrees Fahrenheit in 30 minutes or less. So whether you're enjoying it yourself in your backyard, with friends, or in need of a reliable sauna on the go, Sweat Tent is your best choice for the most portable, storable, and enjoyable outdoor sauna experience. All On the Stacks listeners will receive $100 off when you use code OTS. Visit sweattent.com today to get $100 off your purchase with code OTS at checkout. Again, that's sweattent.com to get $100 off with code OTS. Sweat Tent, helping you fire up your home wellness routine. This episode is brought to you by FitAF. If you haven't already noticed, I live and breathe entrepreneurship. Whether it's launching new ventures, attending pitch meetings, or mentoring budding entrepreneurs, my schedule is jam-packed. And that's where FitAF steps in. Their menu changes weekly, offering a variety of chef-inspired meals designed by nutrition experts using only the best quality ingredients, keeping me fueled and focused. Their vast selection of meals has you covered for all types of dietary restrictions and diet plans, including keto, paleo, vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, and more. As an On the Stacks listener, enjoy our exclusive offer. Get 20% off your first order of 7 meals or more when you use code OTS at checkout at fitafnutrition.com. Again, that's code OTS for 20% off your first order of 7 meals or more at fitafnutrition.com. Healthy meals and seamless nutrition, keeping entrepreneurs at the top of their game. Man, a lot has changed since the last episode. It's been a little over a year. What's been happening?
It's been a wild year. 2025, we're well into it now. I mean, we've had a change in the White House.
There's been so many changes.
I retired
You did?
from being a prosecutor. I had the opportunity to rewatch the episode. I got a lot of nice notes from last time when I was here. I shared the story about my mom and some cases, and people were really touched, and that touched me. I mean, I was grateful to hear people were moved by some of the more deeper things we talked about, and we just touched on a lot of things that pushed me toward the career I ended up getting into. And I think it spoke to people, a lot of young people, and I think a lot of people who had kind of the preconceived notion about who I was or how I did my thing. So I appreciate it, man. And I'm happy to be back. And I've been tuning in pretty regularly. So I see the guests you've had, some very interesting people, some colleagues of mine. So I think it's been great.
How has that transition been for you?
It's been great to be done with the murder and mayhem as a practitioner of the law, as a prosecutor. I think 20 years was a very long time to do that kind of work.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But it took a long time for me to get it out of my system and get used to being out of there. You could imagine doing something at the tip of the spear for 20 years and then expecting to just walk away and be fine. So it took probably Labor Day weekend was the first time I felt like I didn't have to go back to school. You know, you could imagine, not that they don't work in the summer,
Sure.
But as the kids are getting ready to go back to school, I would be preparing for either a larger trial, they tended to be early fall, or the beginning of our trial list again at the courthouse. I didn't have that this year. So there wasn't that.
Those cycles.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you're sitting on the porch thinking, oh boy, here it comes. You know, I didn't have that. And that was the first time I felt relief from not having to deal with that for a while. I needed a break. You know, is it forever? Who knows? But I definitely needed a break. And I'm thrilled to have had that because I felt stuck and it was getting redundant. And I took, as we talked about last time, I took my passion for justice and talking crime to the media. And I've been fortunate to be a part of my own show and, you know, over a dozen national shows now, some upcoming, and that's been great. I spend some time in New York, go out to Manhattan and film, regularly a guest on shows like Dan Abrams or Vinnie Politan at Court TV, Nancy Grace. We have a lot of fun on the Nancy Grace show. So that's a lot. It's great to talk about cases, as I said, that I don't have to carry through to prosecution. And I feel like I'm more honest when I assess these cases because I'm not on a side anymore. I don't have to protect what I'm saying. So there's a free feeling with it too.
Yeah, you're really able to give more opinion. You know, more opinion based.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not bound by those rules of professional conduct. As a prosecutor, you know, the only thing you could say is, this matter is proceeding on to the courthouse and we feel we can meet our burden. And thank you. Have a good day. Now I can be like, this case sucks.
Yeah.
You know, it's like.
And here's why.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's awesome to be in that space. And look, I've always been a fan of that world. So to do the shows of the people I've been watching is a little surreal. You know, when these folks come on the screen, all right, Jarrett, we're going live in 2 minutes. I'm like, this is weird, but I'm getting used to it. And I love it. It's so much fun. You know, we were watching one of the shows. I was the mafia expert on New York Homicide this year on Oxygen. And imagine a show is called New York Homicide. They need a guy from Pittston to be their mob expert, right? So they called me up and said, Jarrett, we heard you're an expert on the mafia. Whenever they call and say, we heard you're an expert on this, the inevitable answer is, of course I'm an expert on this. So,
yes.
So we go into New York and we're filming in this warehouse that looked like a place the mob might take you. And the first question was, what's the difference between an associate and a made member of the mafia? I was like, I thought this was going to be tough, you know? So it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
You know?
So, I mean, obviously a lot of, as you said, a lot has changed. Like what have you been working on? Or what you got some stuff.
So I have my law firm here in Kingston. Yep. So I'm spend a much larger amount of time behind my desk, and my business has grown because I am there more. Part of that part of my life when I was a part-time DA, it was full-time work, full-time. The mental real estate it occupied was tremendous.
Yeah, it was almost all of it.
There was a time where I was not taking as much work in my private practice because of my commitments to the DA's office. I don't necessarily have that problem now either. So I'm able to take on more, trying civil cases now. I had a trial last week, which is weird because, one speed. It's like you get back in the ring and, well, you've been in that very ring doing these big murder cases, and now you're there over a matter of money. I only know one speed. I go in there and it's like, here we go again,
Yeah, right back at it.
Yeah. So, but I've enjoyed that too, because I love, I have tremendous law partners. They're much older than me. I remind them of that every day.
Yeah, you make sure you do.
But I love that work too, because it's very professional, it's financially rewarding, and we get to fight for clients in a different way than I had the chance to fight for victims.
Yeah, I hope you also remind them that you're a much better dresser.
Well, I don't know. They might disagree with me.
I don't know, man. You're anytime I've ever seen you, you're on point. So
thanks, Bill. I appreciate it.
Something I can appreciate. And I don't know if I complimented you on it last time when you were on, but yeah, I can always appreciate you're always fresh.
Well, thanks, buddy. So, I appreciate that.
Yeah, but yes, let's. I know you mentioned you got. I don't know if you said it yet, but you're working on a book.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the book? What's the book about?
So the book, I get the opportunity. I get invited to speak places, and I really like that. And I went to really a keynote speaking school back in late spring last year, and met a lot of people, executives from Nike, captain of a aircraft carrier, just some real heavy hitters. And several of them said, you got to write a book, dude. Because we were doing just mock speeches and stuff. They're like, you got to write a book. All these people have books. And some great fighter pilots, range. I said, you guys have all these great careers. And they said, your stories are unique. Find a way to share them. And I had to write down commitments going forward. So I committed to doing this. And I had an idea that I wanted to write a book about, and I don't mean to say these cases aren't smaller by any stretch, but they wouldn't necessarily carry an entire book. So I wanted to tell the story of several homicides I prosecuted over the 20 years. And I picked certain cases and I highlight the lessons I learned along the way. And one of the things we talked about so in depth last time that really moved people was the story of my mother and how she sacrificed for myself and my brothers. And I saw this theme in a couple of these cases. One mom was a defendant charged with killing her child. One mom fought for justice. One mom was murdered, and her mother fought for her. So I saw this theme. And so the book is essentially, the working title of the book is Mothers, Murder, and Motivation. And it's a true crime self-help book if we ever get it done. But yeah. I'm excited to say we're more than halfway along now. It's therapeutic. It's very therapeutic. I think it's important to look back at. I'm not a person that lives in the past.
Sure, but you gotta reflect on it and learn from it. And,
sure.
And I think, and to be able to even fully move on from it, I think you have to do that to some degree.
Right, and I think I think learning from it is one thing, and then what was the point of all this if you don't pull some of it forward? Mm-hmm. So I went pretty far back. I went to the early cases I had. So it's funny, you sometimes if you don't speak it out loud, you carry these lessons with you. And I'm like, damn, that one taught me this, or I learned this. And so that's really the theme of the book. And it really coincides with the lecture I do, where I get a chance to share these stories that interest people and then tie it to a motivational message.
Yeah. What about, you mentioned, I know you obviously you had some changes in your personal life as well. I know last time we talked a lot about, your mom and, your childhood growing up, but I know you've also had some other changes in your life as well recently.
So one of the great people I talked about last time was Charlie, my stepdad.
I remember, yeah.
And he married my mom when I was 11, came into our lives when I was 9, and sadly passed away very recently. He took a stroke in November of last year. And, fought valiantly, but succumbed to it in January. So I say, people don't get a pass from tragedy. We don't have credit because losing your dad as a kid, you don't get to have Charlie forever now. And I said, I got the chance to eulogize him along with my twin brother, Jay. And I said, God took our father, but sent us a dad, and I had the chance to say the things that needed to be said to Charlie and thank him, we're getting through it. Mom is as strong as she is, and she's getting through it, and we're all getting through it. And she's been awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Greater Pittston Chamber of Commerce, a Distinguished Woman Award. And I'm looking forward to celebrating.
Congrats to her, by the way. That's awesome.
We're looking forward to celebrating that. But losing Charlie was a knock, to our kids and to our family. And just a reminder again, life is precious. You just never know. I mean, this is something that came on so suddenly. And to see the things like, I was down in Florida recently in his garage down there. All the little things he set in motion for when he got back. Here's the guy who expected, like, I'm going to wax the car when I get back. I have all my stuff set up.
What did you guys think? Like, again, like I obviously I knew it happened, but I don't know all the details, right? So I mean, when he had the stroke, what was the outlook at the time?
With strokes, it's hard to say. And the stroke he had was evolving. So we knew it was not great. Fortunately, he never got to a point where he didn't recognize us and stuff. And it was as a result of a heart procedure. So a lot of his systems were failing, and he was only 78. We were hoping to have Charlie around for a long time. But the love of his life still lingers with us. It really does. And there's a lot of Charlieisms that still get spoken and will for a long time. So,
I bet. Yeah, but Mom's doing good?
Yeah, she's hanging in there.
Yeah. The rest of the family's is all good?
Right. And I can't say, my brothers, who I've said are my best friends, we were there every day, and they're tough guys, but they're softies too. They're emotional guys too, and everybody's doing okay.
Yeah. Well, on the again, with the, I know, some stuff has changed with your podcast as well.
So when I was here last time, I was only talking to myself. I was doing True Crime Boss.
That's
Occasionally I'll drop a True Crime Boss episode. But I was doing a Nancy Grace episode, and we were off camera, and Nancy was teasing me about something. I think my shirt was buttoned pretty low, which I've taped here if this thing busts open, right?
Just FYI.
Right. So she was saying something, and one of the commentators, Lauren Conlon, is laughing. And I'm like, what are you laughing at? I don't know. I didn't know Lauren. I've seen her on TV. And we got to talking, and she invited me to come out and do her show. So we met, and I needed someone with her energy and her knowledge and the fact that she's in Manhattan, quite dialed in. I needed someone to bounce stuff off. I needed someone that I was reacting to and was reacting to me. It's much easier to talk with you than to myself. So I had introduced the concept to Lauren when I was out there. I said, we should do something together. And Primetime Crime was born. We do that show weekly. We do the show live. We get on the camera 2 minutes before we go on. We'll email each other the night before. Here's the stories we're going to cover. We have no idea what each other are going to say. We bring guests on. It's crazy how the show's kind of flawless.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's perfect, a perfect show in any way, but the show goes off without a hitch. We pull guests in, our technology's okay. So I've enjoyed that. She was a red carpet reporter in Manhattan. She's dialed in out there. She's introduced me to a great many people. So, partnering with her on this true crime path has been fantastic. And she's passionate, loves what she's doing, is genuinely curious, but doesn't come at it as a lawyer or a prosecutor. So sometimes I have to keep her in check.
Yeah. What about, are you still following Kohberger?
I am, very much so.
Yeah.
So
my wife would be very mad at me if we didn't talk about this, because obviously she knew I told her you were coming in, and she's like, oh my God. She goes, I know I've been seeing Jarrett following up on some of that stuff, and she's like, you gotta ask him. She's like, I need to know. I need more updates. She follows it a lot closer than I do, but what's the latest?
There's a great many things coming out because the trial is approaching. The trial's scheduled to kick off in August, and for those of you out there that don't know, Bryan Kohberger is charged with the murder of 4 beautiful young people in Idaho. And the case has been pending for some time. These things take a while to get together and get ready. But much of it was really under seal. Much of the filings weren't made public, despite the fact that there's cameras allowed in the courtroom. They're chased out for certain portions of the proceedings. So much of the real gritty detail beyond the affidavit of probable cause has been kept under seal since his arrest.
And why is that?
Well, I think there's a fear that the case is going to get tried in the court of public opinion rather than in front of the jury when that day comes. I mean,
see.
if you live on Mars, you're going to know about this case.
Yeah, right.
And you're going to have a strong opinion. I mean, I get battled online. I've had the chance to do Kohberger on Good Morning America 2020. We have a special coming up for a major streamer that's going to drop shortly before the trial, which I'm really excited about. When I tell you all of the individuals that have a stake in this, that have covered this, the authors, the commentators are part of this, including individuals from Idaho. I'm looking forward to that. But as far as what has come out very recently, the prosecution has let out the fact when the filings come out prior to trial, these pre-trial motions, defense attorneys and prosecutors have to get into the gritty details in those filings, because at that point, Bill, you're trying to suppress evidence. You have to have a discussion about where the evidence factors in beyond what's already been made public.
Okay.
So here's what's come out. It's been reported that Bryan Kohberger purchased a K-bar knife 8 months prior to the murders. The K-bar knife came with a sheath. Wouldn't you know it, similar to the one that was found at the scene, that happened to have his DNA on it. That's a significant fact that's come out. In addition to that, there's now speculation that he was searching for a replacement sheath shortly after. Now, that's been referenced through what they call his click activity on Amazon. Now, that's a science that'll be litigated. We'll see where it goes. But that major fact alone really, really is, again, something that tightens the noose around Bryan Kohberger. I've long said in this case, people ask me all the time, do you think this guy's getting set up? I'd say, no, he's not. And are you crazy?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we found the guy. Here's where the setup begins. Well, now the setup began 8 months prior when he purchased the K-bar knife, right? Mm-hmm. Who the hell would know Bryan Kohberger purchased that knife, right?
Yeah.
So the setup would have begun then, right? And when you set someone up, you do a better job than this little morsel of touch DNA that they had to say, but it's only a little bit of DNA. Okay, guy, if they're setting them up, you'd have more DNA you'd throw, right?
Yeah. They wouldn't put the bare minimum, right?
Yeah, really set them up, right? So I could tell you, I feel like the case is strong. His defense attorneys and their team are doing a hell of a job. I mean, they are fighting the prosecution at every pass. That's their job. Mm-hmm. They have two jobs. They have a job. They said their goal is to get him acquitted, okay? But in death penalty prosecution, you have an added job. You got to save your client's life. That's their goal, and that's what they're trying to do. So the other thing that's come out is he's claimed that his lawyer, through his attorneys, that he is autistic or on the autistic spectrum. And a lot of people took that as almost like an effort to negate his guilt, or under that mental disability, insanity, things of that nature.
Yeah, to say he didn't know what he was doing,
yes,
and that's a way out.
That's not what they're saying with that. And it's an important distinction. There's two phases of a death penalty case. There's the guilt phase, which is, are you guilty? Did you commit this crime? That's not where they're introducing the autism yet. We'll come back to it.
Okay.
The autism is a claim that in the United States of America, it's been deemed by the Supreme Court to be cruel and unusual punishment to put someone with a mental infirmity to death. So they're saying in the penalty phase, Bryan Kohberger should not be put to death and could not be put to death because he suffers autism or he's on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
Now, this could be a ploy. This is something, if there is a diagnosis there, and I've seen indicia that this guy he certainly has some quirks, okay? Do his quirks rise to the level of symptoms associated with being on the spectrum? I don't know. I mean,
wouldn't he have had to have been diagnosed probably, well before this? I would imagine if
yes and no,
was, right?
yes and no, but there's so much of his life that he's shown
tendencies,
quirky tendencies, but at the same time, he's done things like, he is a graduate TA. He's a criminology doctoral student, things of that nature that really go away from, you say, okay, you may have a mental health issue, okay, but you are woefully high functioning, woefully below someone who, mental health when it comes to the death penalty is someone who has no idea why they're being put to death. That's not Bryan Kohberger. Someone who has no idea that their lives are being ended because of a crime they committed.
Yes, so he knows the difference.
That's not Bryan Kohberger.
Yeah.
And that's not to look, he may have these conditions. I know that autism could be an extremely serious condition. I'm not saying it's not.
Sure.
But that's where it's factoring in. Now, here's the other thing.
There's another
They're going to backdoor that into, that's why he was wearing gloves when he was bagging garbage at the neighbors when he was in Pennsylvania. That's why he incessantly cleans his car. These are conditions associated with some of the obsessive compulsive disorders of being on that spectrum.
So they're kind of setting it up for
what the truck's backing up. You hear the beep. That's what they're doing. They're going to back it up into that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work.
Wow.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Also your condition lends itself to a guy who's covering up the butcher of 4 people.
Yeah. Yeah. Which obviously there's evidence that shows, that
tremendous evidence.
Tremendous.
The car, the phone, the DNA, the bushy eyebrows, the weird guy, you name it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Is there anything else? Any other new developments?
I think that's pretty much it. Other than we're heading toward trial. I'm looking forward to covering it. I'm going to cover it in addition to the documentary film.
So what happens in between now and then, right? So the trial you said it starts in August?
Yeah. So more pretrial litigation. You're going to see a lot of these lobbying of motions back and forth. He'll be in court quite a bit, all in front of the judge. So the case was moved to Boise, Idaho, too. It was moved out of Moscow, where so there was so much press, so much pressure. They moved it to Boise. You have a new judge who's a no-nonsense judge. Judge John Judge, the original judge, he would painfully go over every decision. He was great. This judge is no nonsense.
So do you think it's good that it got moved? I mean, good for the prosecution.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Fair. Just be fair.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't think the prosecution has anything to worry about. I think they need to keep their head down, don't be distracted. And I think that the defense has done a very good job. Ultimately, I think he's going to be convicted.
What do you think like a case like this costs, all said and done?
The costs are pretty substantial. Here's where the costs come in. You have several lawyers on both sides tied up. The expert fees, the investigative fees, the copying fees, the time. Time is money for professionals and experts. So that's where the cost comes in. And somebody would say, why is this worth it? What a waste of money. It's worth it. Trust me. Our government wastes a lot of money. Okay?
Yeah, we all know that.
But our system can afford to ensure a fair trial, and that the person responsible for killing these 4 young people is held accountable at whatever cost. So this is money well spent. I've always said that. I know it gets expensive. The people making the least are the prosecutors, though I might want to point out. So
yeah. Unfortunately,
right.
Unfortunately, but like I said, my wife she follows it through you, and I'm sure she follows some other I'm not even sure who, but sometimes she'll be sitting there on the couch and she'll be like, there was one I think you posted. I think it was on from your podcast. It was not long ago. It was probably maybe like a few weeks ago, because we've had this scheduled for quite some time now. You coming back in and. She would always be like, hey, when's your coming in? When's that? And I was like, oh, hey, by the way, here was because you did. I think you posted something not long ago. I think you did an episode or something about it recently. But I sent it to her. I'm like, oh, hey, here's something to keep you at bay.
Well, tell her there'll be much more coming out. We're watching every day. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, you may or may not know, but between now and then, I mean, is there a possibility of anything significantly changing, I'll say, for the prosecution or the defense between now and August?
I don't anticipate he's going to plead guilty. So, no, I think information will come out, but I think the trial's going to happen, absent some major evidentiary ruling that has to be appealed, but I just don't anticipate that. I think that this...
Kind of like where it's at is it's going to proceed sort of as is really what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, are you going to be following it closely all throughout?
So I have an opportunity to cover it every day with some outlets. I'm just trying to figure out how and where I'm going to do it.
Yeah, how does that work? Like, how do you do people reach out to you? Like, how does this happen?
Yeah, I think so. I've had I built some relationships along the way, and there's some talk about doing it with some folks on television. I'm definitely, inevitably, I'm going to do it on my own with Lauren and some of our guests. So one way or another, I plan on covering it regularly through the trial process because I understand what's happening in there. It keeps my skills sharp to explain what's going on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people seem to enjoy the fact that we explain what's happening. People follow this case. They want to see justice in this case. There's people that believe in his innocence. I'm not sure what evidence they're looking at. And then you'll see all the commenters. I get blasted for that all the time. It's like, Ferentino ignores this. I'm like, okay, that is a crazy internet rumor, and it's not true.
What was it? What was the crazy?
This stuff about like there was another individual present with him and things of that. And it's like, look, he's the one that matches the physical description. It's his DNA. It's his car. It's none of what we see supports that. And believe me. Not to say that there's not legitimate theories. I wouldn't say legitimate. Circumstantial theories that somewhat could fit the narrative, but nothing is as compelling as what you have here with him.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's going to be a heated thing. But
it's going to be wild.
Yeah. Now, how long does something like this last?
That trial will probably last between 4 to 6 months.
Okay. And I mean, is there again, like some trials I've followed here and there, over the years, but how long could something like that possibly even go? I mean, could there be other instances where this gets dragged out even longer?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's no limit.
Yeah.
There's cases that go on for months and months, almost approaching a year. It goes until, see, here's what takes time. The prosecution has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And to do that, every bit of evidence along the way is tested, and there's a lab report, and then there's a narrative report, and then an expert concludes certain things from that. That's 3 or 4 experts right there that have to testify, have to be qualified, have to be cross-examined, and the defense has to rebut that testimony with an expert of their own. So that's 3 more on their side. It gets drug on and on and on. Now, I believed, and the theory I used to, and I've done very large cases, I've done smaller cases. I always believed concise was key. Find a way. We would have our board in the war room.
I was going to say, did you call it the war room?
Yes, of course. It was a war.
Yeah.
We would have a board full of 60 names. And I would say to our team, because I did work with the team, contrary to what sometimes people think I say I was alone. I credit my teams very much so. But I would say to the group, I want 10 people off that board. Find a way to
keep narrowing it down. And when push comes to shove, it's good to paint with a broad brush at first, and then little by little whittle it down. Yeah, and when you say you have a team, like how many people work on stuff like that?
Usually 2 to 3 lawyers per murder prosecution. And then you would have a detective from the district attorney's office and a detective from either the state police or one of the larger police departments if the homicide happened in Wilkes-Barre, Hazleton, Plains has their own detectives, people like that. So you would have a team of, and then you have a trial assistant and then a victim's advocate at a minimum. So your minimum team size is that 7-8 people.
How do you see it playing out?
This one?
Yeah.
The Kohberger one, you mean?
Mm-hmm,
I would say, now that team's massive on both sides because of the sheer volume.
Right.
But ultimately, Bill, I believe he's going to be convicted.
Yeah. And do you think it's going to? Do you think it's going to kind of happen in a shorter time frame, or do you think it's
I think it's going to be when I say 4 to 6 months, closer to 6 months, and maybe longer.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. I've heard references to terabytes of information and how much of that's actually going to find its way into the courtroom. You're talking about surveillance cameras and all the kind of stuff so we'll see.
So some of it may never even actually make it in.
No, much of it will not.
Yeah.
Much of it will not. And part of a prosecutor's job is burning off that dead wood. You could be at a homicide scene and you could end up months later in your office with all these boxes of materials that have been developed over the process of the investigation. Part of your job is figuring out what part of this do I need, what part of it don't I need. Mm-hmm. And getting that 4 or 5 boxes of materials to one binder of material. That's the goal. Make that trial notebook for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's for me, that was the process of whittling down the drudgery, the excess, and staying focused.
Yeah.
And that's a part of the preparation process that makes you knowledgeable about your case, because you got to know everything that's in those boxes, because you don't know what the other side's going to raise.
Sure. Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to focus it for the jury.
Yeah, so you got to prepare for every single possible scenario that you may or may not have thought of, and hopefully,
it used to surprise me. Like some of the less seasoned DAs would come down and go, "I can't believe it. They're saying he was going to snort all that cocaine." I'd be like, "Yeah, well, he's got 2 options. It wasn't my coke, or I was going to use it, but I was not going to deal it." Right? Like, this is a surprise.
Yeah.
It's like I used to say, "Well, they're going with Plan B. Do you have a plan?" It's like when Rocky starts. He's not a southpaw in the second fight with Apollo, right? He's throwing rights. You got to be ready for that. You don't know what they have no obligation to tell you what they're going to do. So you have to, and part of this, everybody talks about martial arts and jiu-jitsu and all this. Much of what we did and still do is that, anticipating what the other side's going to do. They don't have to do anything. They do not have to testify. They can, if it's a drug case, I possessed the drugs, I wasn't going to deal them. Not my drugs. Or government, you didn't have the probable cause to get into my car. Those things.
Right.
You should not be surprised by the defense that gets taken.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be some surprises.
Oh yeah. But again, this one, autism was a surprise. Alibi was a surprise. I don't know that either are going to carry the day.
Okay. Interesting. Are you following anything else right now? Anything else?
We follow, Lauren and I follow the Karen Reed case, which will give you a headache out of Massachusetts. We follow a missing persons case for Nikki Saley McCain out of California, which is a case that's developing at this point. We've also followed the Kansas Moms case. And I think one of the special things about our show is people very close to those cases follow us and reach out to us. And it's part of continuing to be a voice for some of those people, and being able to answer their questions is really, really interesting, and has been an unexpected benefit of doing this kind of work.
Yeah. I was just it just popped up in my mind, and I forget how long ago this one was, and I'm trying to look up the year right now, but it was something locally, and I'm curious if you I don't know if it was before your time or not here at the DA, but there was that one cold case from a long time ago that just popped back up again. Like it was I'm looking up. It's Patricia Morton. Is that the name? Do you recognize that?
Yeah,
name?
that occurred when I was there. I didn't personally handle the investigation. In fact,
I don't know what it was that you said, but for some reason it just reminded me.
So in those cases, like sometimes the answers take a long time. I'm happy. Like, look, I represented the family of Brittany Drexel. Brittany Drexel vanished off the face of the earth in April 2009 when she went to South Carolina on spring break. She was a beautiful 17-year-old kid. She went down there with her friends, and for 13 years, there were no answers. There was speculation that the wrong people were involved. Their family, particularly Dawn Drexel, Brittany Drexel's mother, who I represented, never gave up and kept on those investigators, kept on the FBI. Sometimes I would have to back Dawn off. Like, I would be like, this is getting crazy. But she never gave up. In fact, and I'm going to tell you, the killer himself, Raymond Moody, who has been found, Brittany's body was found. Raymond Moody led investigators to her body, confessed and pled guilty. And I was there for that. It was incredible. He said in a statement, when Dawn had the billboards up and refused to stop getting out into the press and going at the investigators, he said one time, "I wish she would just go away." That's the power of keeping cold cases in the press, keeping the pressure on. That forces people to talk. It makes the killers nervous, contrary to, and believe me, I've encountered some killers in my day. Raymond Moody is no joke, and it made him nervous.
It wore him down, huh? So eventually they just kind of wore him down, and like, what was the turning point?
The turning point was a new team of FBI investigators that took the time to parse through so much surveillance footage and go in it with an open mind, be willing to be wrong about some of the things in the past, just old-fashioned detective work, some technology, but really it was surveillance video, hours and hours of it that ultimately triangulated when the crime happened, when Brittany vanished, where she was taken, that really circled the wagons around Moody, back to Raymond Moody, who was a multi-time kidnapper from California who found his way to Myrtle Beach, and then ultimately led to him being confronted, confessing, and being charged.
So wait, so were there other crimes that he had also previously committed?
Yes.
What happened with those?
So he was in prison in California for 20 years as a result of multiple kidnappings of young children.
Wow.
And he got out. He should have never got out.
Yeah, I was going to say, how the hell was he out?
He himself says, I was a monster then. I'm still a monster. I was there when he said it.
When did he say that?
He said it in court when he accepted his guilt for Brittany Drexel.
Wow.
So the first time Don laid eyes on Raymond Moody, I was there. I was sitting next to her. And he comes in, he pleads guilty, and it was surreal. I mean, I've been in a million courtrooms. I'd never seen anything like this.
Yeah, how'd it go?
Dateline was there, helicopters. Yeah. I mean, and it was all, we don't have cameras in our courtroom. There were 30, 40 cameras inside the courtroom. So it was wild. It was a day that Don waited a long time for. We traveled from there to the gravesite where they found her, and prayed with the FBI agents. I mean, it was an incredible, I've been down there a couple times with Don through this process, and it was incredible. It was an incredible journey.
Wow. That's wild. Now, what determines, obviously I've watched a fair share of, true crime show documentaries, et cetera, and, sometimes they say cameras are allowed or not. Like, how is that decided? Like,
so it's a state rule typically. In Pennsylvania, they are not allowed. And in federal courts, they're not allowed. So more often than not, though, the trend is they are being allowed into courtrooms. The Murdaugh case in South Carolina.
We just watched that one, literally just like a week ago. That's what made me kind of
looking back. Sometimes I wish they were there. I'm glad they weren't for others though. So it's hard to say. I think it would be quite a distraction. And this Karen Reed case is crazy. I mean, the court hearings, even the pretrial stuff for round 2 is on every day, and my YouTube algorithm is all Karen Reed for some reason right now. So it's like live in the courtroom, people are very interested in it, but I think that when push comes to shove and you're in that courtroom, I wouldn't want that as a distraction necessarily. I think oftentimes, people are playing to the camera and things.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do these things? I mean, I kind of sort of know the answer, but I'm sure you can expand on it. But how do these things affect the cases? From the defense and the prosecution.
Well, the prosecutors will tell you they don't. Oh, we don't care about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, I would. I mean, I want to make sure I look okay and sound okay, and I'm not.
Well,
screwing
usually you look all right.
Thanks. You
don't have to worry about that.
But like I would, I mean, come on, what kind of work are we engaged in? And by the way, you should not be bothered by, oftentimes, like I get a lot of criticism online or from my opinions, strong opinions on Kohberger, which is fine. That's fair game. I'm happy to have a discussion. But as a prosecutor, you shouldn't be worried about what's being said about your case out there or distracted by it if you're in the ring doing the case. That I understand. But believe me, if they say that they're not playing to the camera, that we're people.
Yeah, let's be real.
Come on.
Yeah. Do you know? Did you follow any of a little bit of that? Any of that Murdaugh one?
Oh yeah. I've done some stuff on that.
Yeah. Like, what's your opinion on that one?
He did it. Yeah. Buster got a raw deal. His son. I think his son was tied to something that it appears he had nothing to do with another young man that was killed down there. But what I couldn't believe. Here's the big thing with Murdaugh.
It's like we just watched this one. That's why I'm.
Whenever people ask me about Murdaugh, I say, if someone is lying about little things immediately in the murder investigation of their wife and son, something is very terribly wrong. And he was lying immediately.
Yeah.
And that video of him down at the kennels and his voice, I mean, that sunk him. But to think, as a lawyer, someone who was a prosecutor, Murdaugh was a prosecutor, a multi-generations, they took the pictures of his father and grandfather down from the courtroom where he was to stand trial. Like, talk about a fall from grace. This guy took a header off the top of the courthouse down, right? He was unfazed by it. I mean, he struck me as just pure, I don't know if it's narcissism or sociopathy, but how a guy who was successful as a civil lawyer, as a criminal lawyer, turns around, takes out his wife and son, and the backstory with the boat accident and all that. It's an incredibly complicated, tragic story that all comes back to a guy who thinks he can do anything, and that's who he was.
Wow.
I think every story, including the boat accident, begins and ends with Alec Murdaugh and his arrogance, his narcissism, his sociopathy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, some of these people, I know you said, about one of their cases, these murderers and like the things, like just the way that they act. And I mean, just, it's probably pretty chilling. I mean, you kind of sort of alluded to that before, but
sometimes it's chilling.
Like hearing like, it was the confession,
I've seen killers that have killed in the heat of passion. I've seen killers who have immediately regretted their actions. I've seen killers that were stupid. I've seen killers that were gangbangers, that this is the way of life. It's either I'm going to be killed in the street or die in a jail cell. I encountered, here's some of the nicknames of some of the people I encountered. A hitman named Hazard. Now, what do you think his street rep was? I had another guy, his name was Ruthless. Okay, these were defendants I went against. Another guy whose street name was Monster. Okay? These are not people you want around.
They're not good dudes.
Well, I could tell you this, they earned those nicknames. And I'm happy to report I did successfully prosecute all three of those individuals.
Okay, good. 3 for 3.
But
good.
I learned something from them.
Were they local?
They were local cases, yeah. Both Ruthless and Hazard were not local to the area, though. They traveled here and committed
crime here. Okay, yeah, that's
part of what led to them. But I had the opportunity to speak to both of them too. In pretrial things and leading up to trying to negotiate maybe a plea. But you learn something. You never think you could learn from people like Ruthless or Hazard.
Yeah.
And
what did you learn?
Just life's complicated. It's easy to write them off as pure evil. They didn't strike me as pure evil in the moment. They talked to me about their lives and they grew up in the street. They weren't cared for. I'm sure they were loved by someone, but this was the lifestyle they lived. I didn't see a lot of regret from either of those individuals. I didn't. I don't even know that they were capable of that.
What were they? Briefly, just what were their cases?
So Ruthless was the DJ Mo murder. Hazard was it was a double attempted murder of 2 individuals in Wilkes-Barre, and one was an double attempted, but that caused permanent injury to the victims. How they survived is beyond me. I mean, he had every level of intent to kill them, and Ruthless was the shooter in the DJ Mo murder.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm somewhat familiar with that. I think you actually mentioned that one. I think.
Yeah, and that one was. I
just didn't know. I don't think I knew his nick. I don't think I knew.
Yeah, that was his
street name. Street name. Yeah. Well, what were some other street names you came across?
Smoke, D-Rock, Butter, a lot of different ones that weren't necessarily bad.
Yeah.
So I've never had a nickname in my life. I was like, remember George Costanza tried to earn it. He ended up being Coco the monkey. He was like, he wanted to be T-Bone.
Yeah.
I never had.
You don't think? You don't think there was one maybe that somebody gave you just never.
I've been called things. I just don't have a nickname. I know 20 Butchies and all. But I do
I'm sure you've been called every name in the book.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I mean, out of all these murderers and evil people and trials and all the stuff you've been through, I mean, obviously, you did say, there is still something to be learned. But, beyond that, the lessons and stuff, what else has it really taught you?
It's a unique way to navigate the world. Here's what's...
Because you have probably such a different perspective. After these experiences.
Here's what it does. Other people's drama, when they come to you with could you believe this? I'm like... I could believe that somebody would say that at your job.
Yeah.
Or
believe that's not something to be worried about.
I said it last time. I was like, I'm sure people have their problems, but it gives you a broad perspective
of what really a problem, what a big problem is.
Fighting for Don Drexel or for a couple of years there. And I knew how not having answers on Brittany was just, it broke her personally, financially. It destroyed their family. So I knew, that's horrible. I mean, what could you say to make her feel better? So what has it done to change? My life has been unique in that regard. And I didn't make millions of dollars doing that. This is who I am. This is not me being bragging. This is a fact, okay? That's where my life took me. The unique perspective is I can do that and then come home and play Mario Kart for an hour, with my babies, and you can't stop living the rest of your life because of some of the harder or harsher things you're exposed to. You got to go home and be daddy, and you have to do that. Like, you can't stop doing that. You can't not to say that this has not bled into my personal life.
It's definitely not easy.
I'm not a robot.
Right.
There's times dad doesn't feel like playing Mario Kart tonight. I'm going to sit on the porch and have a cigar.
I'm going to sit it out tonight. Right. Taking the night off.
But, I made personal changes. Like I said, I know a lot of prosecutors that drink too much. I stopped drinking in 2012. Okay. I didn't have a problem. I liked to drink. I would drink socially. I'm like, you know what? I got so much going on. I can't be doing this too. It's like complicating things. So I stopped, never intending to stop forever. That was 13 years ago. I've never gone back. I drink Heineken Zero.
Do you?
Yeah. But you have to have something with Old Forge pizza. But I think...
Has it made you sharper? Has it made you more focused?
Well, it leaned me out. Like, I lost total, because I was like a beer drinker or whatever. Yeah. But and that's not a judgment on people that drink. It's like, if ever I do that, like, I'll be out and I order something and my mother will be like, not that he had a problem. I just had a big problem, or I say somebody would be like, well, I don't drink that much. So we get but
you always have to defend it, right?
It was something I decided, and I never decided in that moment to do it forever. I just felt.
I said, hey, I'm just going to cut this out for now.
Personally, I felt way better.
I did the same thing. I know back when, it's been almost a year now for me when I had the, I had that little AFib incident with my heart. Right. And same thing up until that point. And, it's funny. I've done the same thing too, where I'd always be like, and whenever I tell the story, and I know you already know this, but I'm just saying it for maybe people that are listening and watching that maybe haven't heard this or don't know this. But anytime I've ever, also told that story of when that happened to me, I'll be like, oh yeah, and then I quit drinking. And I'm like, and by the way, he always has to be like, oh, I don't have a drinking problem, or he didn't have a drinking problem, right? But same thing, what I said in the moment, I was like, because the doctor said hey, alcohol, do you drink? I'm like, yeah. Like, how much? I'm like, casually, no more than the other guy, or gal. But it was just in that moment, they said, well, hey, just so you know, alcohol is one of the main contributors or factors that could cause AFib. And they of course suggested, hey, maybe just do some. Here are some things you could do for a little healthier lifestyle.
Right.
Not that I wasn't living a healthy lifestyle. I wasn't living the healthiest, but I wasn't. It's not like I'm not partying every night, right? But I was a beer guy too. I loved to have an IPA or two. But yeah, so same thing. I cut out alcohol and similar to you, how you said, oh, well, yeah, I'm cutting it out for now. Don't know if it's gonna be forever or whatever. And same thing with me. I mean, I haven't had a drink since, and I don't know. I probably won't again.
Yeah, I think the most stark for me, change for me was definitely I just immediately, within 2-3 weeks, started to slim down.
Yeah,
right. And so then I was like, well, geez,
I like this better.
Yeah,
I like this better.
But again, I definitely did like that. But at the same time too, my life was changing. Like, baby number 2 was on the way, and it's like, you don't have, I'm not spending as much time with my buddies socially drinking either.
Right.
So
you don't really have as much time.
It made it pretty easy to stop.
Yeah.
But I'm heading over to Italy. I don't know. Am I going to have wine?
That's going to be a challenge. Yeah. Because I was also, I was a red wine guy.
Yeah.
I loved, who doesn't love a good red wine?
Right.
For those obviously that indulge.
So that might be tough. I don't know. We'll see.
That'll be tough. That'll be tough.
See.
Yeah. But back to, before I was saying about, some of these lessons and stuff, one of the things that comes to mind for me is the resilience. I feel like I feel like you have to have it, or at least it's probably built a resilience in you. I mean, to continue to, to fight, for what's right. And eventually, somebody gets worn down, like as you were saying before about, some of these murderers, they eventually sort of just get like worn down. But while they're getting worn down, it's like you're building this resilience, and you built this resilience to, to keep fighting and to never give up. And it's impressive because, obviously it's a very serious matter, murder or any type of crime, obviously. And it's not something that, anybody would just give up on pretty easily, I would assume. But
so you said about like resilience, you wonder what somebody brings to that ring, what does the killer bring?
Right.
What is their background? What does the defense lawyer bring? And some of those folks have very interesting lives. Like I built that resilience early in my life. We talked about losing my dad. The other thing I did that I didn't talk about that shaped me profoundly was I had a great uncle that lived across the street, and his name was Godfrey. He had polio, and it left him a paraplegic. He was funny, not the sharpest knife in the drawer, had a simple life. My grandmother took care of him. He would tease us, my brothers and I, and he was present in our lives. He lived across the street. He had limited mobility, so he was always around. Around the age of 12, when I was 12, he developed bursitis in his elbow. So you want to talk about a cruel joke. Here's a guy who was left to walk with braces, who depended on his arms to get him up and down everywhere he went, including out of bed, off the commode, all this stuff. So when I was 12 years old, he developed double bursitis from heavily depending on his elbows, and became so afraid that he was going to end up in a nursing home that made me commit, like, please don't say how bad this is. And I would just stay there and kind of get him up out of bed, kind of get him going, just telling my grandmother, oh, he just needs a little bit of extra help. And my grandmother would do whatever she could to take care of her brother. But it was getting to a point where he was giving up. He was saying, what every day he would tell me, I'm going to kill myself. This is not good. It's going nowhere good. And as a young kid, I'm 13, 14 at this point, I would give him a reason every day. Come on, don't do that. Who am I going to hang out with? Who am I, and I was a kid, Bill. I was not a good student. We had the ones, the twos, and the threes in school. My wife, Nicole, God bless her, she was in the ones. You know where I was? The threes.
Yeah.
Right?
Me too.
The behavior problem, the learning disability problem. Some of those guys I prosecuted, by the way, that were in the threes with me. But
at least you didn't end up like them, right?
And as an athlete, I was on the bench in practice. Like so I felt like I had no real use to anybody. I always believed like something's got to give here. I got something to offer the world, right?
Yeah.
But taking care of him was something unique for me, and I loved it.
You said 12, 13?
It started when I was 12. It progressively got worse through high school, though. He just, once in a while he would need a leg up. Then it was every day. So, but seeing that as a young man, seeing how unfair life can be. Here's this man who of little means, right? Mm-hmm. Wasn't a teacher, didn't teach me anything, but I learned a lot. Like when I'm sitting across from a killer in a courtroom, or a big shot lawyer from Philadelphia, I think, you went to Harvard, congratulations. I went to Uncle Godfrey School. I know life can be unfair. I know what it takes to be committed. I know what it takes to keep going and take care of people and fight. And that lesson along the way, that's what changed me. That's what, no matter what bullshit somebody's experiencing, no matter what they're going through in their life, I understand there's tragedy in this world, but I always think back, it's not as bad as it was for him. And you found a way to get him through it. And then eventually he passed, and eventually he did have to go to a nursing home. It just got beyond our ability.
Sure.
But I'm grateful. And my brothers did a nice job of helping too. This was not something I did totally on my own.
Sure. It was something you took pride in, and it's something that you learned from.
Never complained and enjoyed the fact that I felt useful. You know, it was something I've said, well, of course I'm going to look out for him, you know?
Yeah, and as a kid, obviously as a kid, you probably think to yourself, like, you feel like sometimes maybe as a kid, you feel like you can't contribute as much to, something around the house, your house or whatever it is. And, because you're a kid, right?
Right.
And I feel like probably in that moment for you, you're probably like, hey, this feels good to me. Not only obviously it's your family. So, there's that love there. But at the same time, you probably felt, you were really contributing.
But it gives you perspective. It gives you that. Those experiences give you resilience, you know, and it's like, you remember the first time you got dumped in your life? You remember the second time it wasn't as bad.
Right,
you know what I mean? And like little by little, you're like, I'm getting resilient. I'm getting better at this.
Yeah.
Seeing that early on, that really shaped. It's like, well, this is also what trained me to do what I'm doing. Yeah, I learned the law in law school, but I learned a lot then.
Yeah, and just as you said, you could have the guy that went to Harvard, and on paper he could have the best. It could look like he's got the best resume and the best skills in the world. Like, how am I going to beat the guy that went to Harvard? How am I going to be? It's like you're up against the best of the best of the best. But that always doesn't mean everything.
And there were two stories. The only time I ever asked, I sat down to take the bar exam, and I said so that there's a digital clock on the screen, and it's this big digital clock in the front of the room, and it says 7:58. And I said, the Pennsylvania bar exam will begin in 2 minutes. Please take this time to prepare to begin the bar examination. I looked over at a girl, Katie, I went to law school, and we have a test today? So we're sitting there with like 200 other prospective lawyers. So I said, what the hell am I going to do for this 2 minutes, So I said a quiet prayer to my uncle. And I said, I never asked you for anything. Get me through this, and I'll take care of people like you. And I could smell him. Isn't that crazy? I could smell. He used to wear this cheap aftershave that the whole room was. I literally and I said, "Okay, I got you.
Wow.
Get me through it. Get me through it the first time, and I will fight for people that cannot fight for themselves." I committed to him in whatever form or fashion. And I'm a believer, man. And I said, that's what I asked for. And I said, just get me through it, get me my license, and we'll do what we got to do from there.
Wow, that's a hell of a story. Yeah, you never shared that one.
Yeah,
shared that one.
There's a couple of doozies still.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, but that one is
impactful.
Yeah, and
really
I have
is.
his hat. His hat is in my law office on the shelf.
And I bet you it probably still has some of that smell. I bet you, right?
No, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is. It's weird. It is. It's one of those things. Even me, like I have. There's actually several items here in this building that came, from my grandparents' house, my mom's parents, and they've been both passed for several years now. And I'm not gonna lie, like I could go and I could pick those things up. I'll show you after. But if you there's a couple items in here that you pick up. I mean, you won't know the smell, but you might be able to smell that it smells different than this place.
Right.
And it smells exactly like their house. And it's so funny, like when you say it too, because I have a group message with my 10 other cousins, and all on the same side of the family. And one of them texts something about some item that our grandparents had. They somehow got it. It was just like I don't know what it was, like a clock or something. It was just something that was memorable that one of them got when one of the grandparents passed. But they made the comment in the group chat, like, and by the way, you open this thing up and you could just smell, like it just smells. We call Grammy and Pop-Up, as we call them. It smells exactly like Grammy and Pop-Up's house. Like,
isn't it crazy?
It's weird.
And the olfactory nerve is like the tied to memory the greatest. It's it's special. And like I said, that was a special relationship I had. Mm-hmm. And again, this was not a man of means, a man of money. It's just funny how this simple life shaped so much of my life.
Yeah, you would never expect, like you would think, you always think it would be some bigger event or something, and it was just as simple as
small special moments, that you look back and you're like, man, that was tough for a kid to be doing. And what does it mean, and what do you pull from that? Yeah, and that's what it was. I mean, it was just I like I said, sat on that bench. Was not a good student, but I mattered to him. I certainly mattered to my brothers. But I mean, that was some little thing I was contributing to the world, to someone. And somebody relied on me.
Yeah.
And then I would sit at the end of his room on a bench and just talk to him all the time and tell him whatever was going on, you know. And and when you're the youngest of 4 boys, you don't have a lot of active listeners in the house. So there was that.
You were always fighting for the attention. Yeah, I think we might have talked about that last time. Like, you were always, you with the brothers. It was always something.
Sure.
You know, and I'm sure you probably got beat up on probably the most.
Oh yeah. You know. I held my ground though, Bill.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I definitely won't argue that. I mean, because you don't look like a guy that wouldn't put up a fight. So
no, I try. I try. Hang in there.
Yeah.
And I fight dirty too. I'll pick up a rock or something.
Yes, something, right? You have to. Sometimes you just have to.
Right.
You know? But no, like you said, it does. It builds that resilience, and I think but it shows a lot, man. Because again, like in that moment, that's the thing is, I think a lot of people don't realize is even as a young kid, like you could have experienced that with him, and you could have, that could have, just that experience alone maybe could have mentally sent you the other way,
right?
But it didn't, thankfully, obviously,
right? Because it was sad, it was tragic. And whenever the kids will say that, or somebody says, "Hey, that's not fair," I think, go tell the Ukrainians about fair. Go tell. But I think about life can be unfair, and it doesn't get undone. It didn't get better for him.
Yeah.
His life ended, and it got worse. And that could mess with you.
Yeah,
that could mess,
especially as a kid.
Yeah,
you're a teen. And that's right. Those developmental years. Are obviously some of the most
I
crucial.
didn't walk around like I didn't, and I hope it doesn't come off that way. Like I'm walking around, look at how great I was. I didn't broadcast. That was just part of my life.
You were just hanging out.
Yeah,
you were just hanging out.
I didn't feel noble for it. It was like, I love this guy. I'm going to look out for him. And my brothers did too.
You were just a kid, just hanging out.
And I wasn't like 30 years from now, I'm going to appreciate.
I'm going to have this grandiose story of what I did for him. It's like, no, because and how you wouldn't even. You're a kid. You don't think of those things.
But don't you think now you look back and you're like, why do I do some of the things I do? What caused this?
Like what was
right?
Yeah,
and
like
you
what was
look
it?
back and you're like, well, that was different.
Yeah. Yeah, often you would look back at your childhood and see, like, you know what? Oh, now I understand, like, why I do this. Now I understand, like, why I might relate to these type of people because something may, like, as you said, something.
And those things push you forward. I was talking, like, motivation gets a bad rap. Now, you ever like David Goggins? They're all against motivation. Like, love Goggins, right? Mm-hmm. Great to listen to when you're like. What's wrong with motivation? I understand it doesn't last through like the extra innings and stuff, but like,
But you got to have some of it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Or like feeding your kids is a good motivation and it doesn't really wane. I understand discipline's more important and longer lasting.
Yeah.
But you kind of need
survival. Survival
like,
is pretty.
Kids got to eat. Motivation.
Yeah.
Mortgage has to be paid. Motivation.
Yeah.
Car not
taxes.
Repossessed.
Yeah.
Right. Taxes. So I look at things like that and say that pushes you forward. What pulls you forward is this motivation.
Yeah.
Obviously providing a life for your family, for your wife and children, and supporting everyone and each other. But I noticed that. I was like, I listened to a lot of that stuff. And
what do you frequently listen to Goggins? Like something like that?
I listen to, and I've had an opportunity to meet some of the people I listen to doing the press stuff. So Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Oh, yeah, I love
had
Jordan
the chance
Peterson.
to meet Dr. Peterson.
No way.
He's someone very deep, very
deep,
intimidating. He's so smart. You're like,
dude. So sometimes I'm watching listening to his stuff, and I'm like, all right. I need to rewind it like 4 times. Yeah. So I'm like, what's he saying?
Right, and everybody relax. Like I don't agree with everything Jordan says, but he takes complicated philosophical things and for the most part breaks them down.
Yeah.
So I had the chance to meet him in Philadelphia this past year, and I'm going over, and he's standing there to say hello. I'm like, what am I going to say to Jordan?
Yeah, what do you say to a guy like that, right?
Well, I told him, we had a nice exchange. I told him what I do and that much of his work helped me, get through some of those things and helped me take a look at why I was doing the prosecution this way or running my business this way. So he was appreciative of that. He was very kind, very nice exchange, took a picture. But I listened to him. I certainly listened to him. I'm trying to think who else like David Goggins I listen to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
a lot of these are mixed too. Like you'll do these YouTube.
And you just get clips. You just when you're scrolling, I get it. You're scrolling if you like one of those, then you get them all.
But Dr. Wayne Dyer, who has passed, Dr. Dyer was around in the late 70s, early 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. He was a motivational speaker. There goes that word again, right? Dr. Dyer, and he wrote dozens of books. I've read much of his books. I've listened to a lot of his lectures. There are gems in what he says. First of all, nothing he says will ever hurt anyone. This is a man. He's Jordan Peterson light. Jordan is tough. Dr. Dyer was very inspirational to me, and I would find morsels in what he was saying, use them in opening statements, use them in closing statements. People are like, damn, where did that come from? I mean, it's I stole it off Dr. Dyer. You know, and things that wouldn't seemingly relate to being a dad, being a lawyer.
Like you were able to take those and translate them.
Whatever. You could be a plumber. You could be running a business in finance, whatever. If you look for those guides, they're like, I love what people tell me, like, oh, I can't. Do you realize the education you get on YouTube for free?
Yeah.
I listen to that stuff all the time. So I run in the morning, and
I was gonna say, do you still have that early morning routine?
Yeah. So I run usually about 5 miles in the morning, and I look forward to. So I pregame, like, what am I going to listen to tomorrow morning? You know, I have like a regular stuff, but then I'll add something for the end. A lot of it is that kind of stuff. And I'm always like, I'm going to remember this, you know, and then I totally forget what was said at the end. I was like, you're in that moment.
Sure, yeah.
So, I still do that. I still run, still try to work out to try to keep myself, again, sane with how busy things get. But, you know, as this next chapter has started, you can't let that stuff go by the wayside. It's still very important.
Yeah, and you know, speaking of that, with the again with this transition, right? You know, coming out of the DA's office, like, you know, do you feel like there's a gap like that, like a void that you need to fill? Because I mean, that was a huge 20 years. I mean, that was a major part of your life. And I know you're doing it. You know, now again, like as you said, like you can comment on things with more opinion based and all that, and maybe you're filling the gap a little bit with some of the stuff, the cases that you're following and all that. So I'm sure it probably sort of fills that gap a little, but it's just, I know it's probably not the same.
Yeah. Toward the end, it was kind of a drag. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I crawled toward that finish line like this. Like I was just carrying a lot of cases. I was becoming
really burning
like
out,
a whiner in the like, I got to get out of here. I was like the old guy who had a lot of cases. So, I mean, I just don't miss that. Like, and I was like, I got to get out of here before I become bitter.
Yes.
No, I don't miss that. Do I feel the void? Like
something like you kind of need something to sort of fill that.
I thought I was. I thought I was going to.
Do you feel like you have more free time now, though?
I have more peaceful time.
I like that.
I have more time where I could take the time to my life for 20 years was there's a fire here, that goes out, that one already started. We're going over to that stopped. And that took some getting used to. That wasn't pleasant when it stopped
because I remember, in the last episode when you were on, you said you had at that time when you were on last, you had 8 pending murder trials. I don't know why that just stuck. It just that fact.
Which was so I was conditioned, and my state was constantly dealing with this fire's burning here, this one's starting to burn, and we expect one to be over here. So that was a change, and it was not a pleasant change because you get anxious. Like, I'm an anxious person. I can't sit still initially. I'm getting better at that because I have more time to address things. And like I said, in my private office, I'm taking things on, but in civil practice, things are a little different. It's like, oh, respond to that in 30 days. You're like, 30 days.
Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah,
so, but you fill the void. Here's how you fill the void. You put pressure on yourself. If you're a self-motivated person, you find other things to freak yourself out
It's
about.
true.
It's like, oh, I got to get to pick up Victoria up at dance and stuff. And it's like, I got to get there. So
we have other things to worry about to put the pressure on. Yeah.
But if there's a void, I filled it with new work in the civil realm, additional work, and the entertainment stuff, and much more family time, much more chilled out time.
Yeah.
I think I'll be able to work in the yard more this year and stuff. And I don't miss it. 20 years, like, if you miss it, you didn't do enough.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I look back and I was like, at the
I've
end,
had
it was
enough.
Yeah. And what's the expression? Like, I miss the circus, but not the clowns. I miss the camaraderie. I miss there's some great people there. Some people I don't miss at all. Like, there's some, any other place, but there were some.
Of course.
But there's people that are long gone and passed on. I talked about Gary Capitano and people like that. There's nothing you could do to unmiss those people. I mean, you're going to miss those people. Life changes. I felt stuck there at the end. And that's not a pleasant feeling. Yeah, yeah.
Why?
Because I wanted to hit that 20-year mark. I knew that I probably should have left sooner. Not a lot sooner, but so I felt stuck. I'm like, I got to get out, Yeah,
but you probably also felt an obligation you want to. You had that passion for it, and but you also like, there's so much going on.
At that point, I'd started television. I was on the Drexel case, which was a huge case in South. Like things were changing in this part of my life.
That realm.
This part of my life, my responsibilities were increasing, and my ability to be present there was not there, and it was becoming redundant. So I felt stuck. I'm like, I gotta just make a change here.
Sure.
So toward the end, that's how I felt. That may be why I don't miss it so much, but I stay in touch with everyone. I still see many of my dear friends from the office.
Yeah.
And those I don't care to see, I don't, unless I run into them in the store or something.
Yeah, that's funny. No, but like I said, 20 years. I mean, it is. I mean, you've experienced a lot, man.
You're supposed to say you don't look like you could have done anything.
Yeah, that was coming next.
Right.
Yeah. You still look the same as you did 20 years ago. There you go.
Right. Thank God to Botox and plastic surgery. I have a brother-in-law, Chris Sanders, who you've had on.
That's right.
Chris.
Yeah.
Thank God for Chris.
Yes. Speaking of that, I have to get some more recommendations from you, because I mean and everybody always asking that too. Everybody always says, like, how do you find your guests? Because everybody always compliments me. Hey Bill, like, you just have on some like the most interesting people. And I'm like, well, yeah. I said, because the interesting people also know interesting people. And, people come on, they say, hey, man, that was great. I love coming on. And then, I'll say people in your network watch, and then they're like, oh, hey, whether they ask you and say, hey, I don't know that guy, but could you get me on or whatever? But you recommended him.
I had a friend, I was out for dinner last night. I had a friend, I said, I'm going to do it on the stacks tomorrow. And he said, oh, I want to get on that show. He said, could you ask me? I like this. No, listen, you're not going to carry an hour and a half.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
No, but I will. Yeah. And I do have, like I said, I have so many characters in my life.
You do, yeah.
Who I love. That's the other thing. One thing about being here in northeastern Pennsylvania, doing what I do, I feel like I know
the characters.
Oh my God. And like, I love that. I just enjoy that. It's just a wild adventure. And like, I make sure, so Dominic is 18 now, Victoria is 12, but Victoria's still with us all the time. Dom's out living his life, and I make sure Victoria knows everybody. She remembers everybody. So she's getting she's getting a pretty wide experience and a variety of people in life. And she always knows. I'll always say to her, "Does Daddy like that person or no?" And she'll be like, yeah, or yes, she could tell.
Yeah. She's learning. She's learning. Yeah. No, you definitely seen your fair share of characters.
Oh yeah, and this area in particular, you go to New York and they'll be like, you go to New York and bring a Pittston attitude.
What do they think? Like when you talk and see to these people out of town, and I'll say, like, from your experience of being on television and a lot of shows, and you've been on some really big networks and shows and in a lot of films and stuff. I mean, when you really share some of these these stories and these people and things, like, I'm curious, like what their reactions are.
We're sitting at a table here. I've sat at a table, have had the pleasure and the honor to sit with some big shots in media, but I come at it from, who does this guy think he is? The Pittston
little
approach.
Town, like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah. So I come in, here's why I think my experience and the experience of DAs and public defenders and law practitioners in a region like this, we're bigger than the small guys. And we're not too big that young people cannot have this tremendous experience through the years at a very early age. So I think what surprises people in that business is someone, I'm not saying I'm a kid, but someone as young as I'm only 47 years old, to have the multiple years of experience that goes back 20 years, because from the very beginning as a young assistant DA in Luzerne County, you're entrusted with some pretty heavy stuff, because we have a lot of it here. We don't have 100 assistant DAs. And if you're willing to take these cases, you will be granted. Your wish will be granted. So I think that surprises people sometimes. Also, in doing those cases, you build that confidence, you build that experience where they say, Jarrett, have you ever seen anything like this? Interestingly enough, yes.
Yes, I have.
Let me go into the archives.
Yeah, hold on here.
So that's why, like, they'll say, I've never done anything remotely close to as big as Kohberger is, right? But I've seen everything in the case. So I understand it, and I've seen it a lot.
Right.
Now, all together, no. But when we're talking about one particular motion, I've done death penalty cases. The issues are the same. They're in, and believe me, you think Boise wanted to find itself in this situation? This is a huge thing. And so I think the experiences, whether it's in New York, whether it's in Boise, translate. And here's the other thing. I said this when we were here last time, and I often say it. This is not an easy place to find success in business. It's work hard, you'll be rewarded, but it's also a place where you have to have some heft. You have to have a lot of courage
and grit.
You have to,
Everybody always talks about that. Often I hear from people, they say about the grit. The grit of the people of this area.
Right. So I think I've benefited from seeing it. I've learned from people that had it. I try to do it. I try to emulate that. So when I go into New York, I'm certainly deferential to people, but I have something to say too. I'm not going to sit quiet at the table. So, and for the most part, and all of those people have come up here though and spent time, by the way. The TV people have come up and love it up here. So, and some have places in the Poconos. Yeah. So,
they're not far off. Yeah, they're not far off.
No,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But, the response has been great.
Plus, I'm sure they appreciate that you're a sharp dresser.
Yeah, right. I know it's not Fifth Avenue, but the other thing is the goal is for me, I never know when that ride's going to end.
Sure.
Is this the last time I'm going to be on television? So the goal always is get another gig when you're there. So just last week I was done. I was like, I don't have anything planned. I have some stuff coming out that's already in the can, it's done, but I had nothing on the calendar. I was coming up. I'm sitting outside. I'm like, hey, this might be it. By the end of the week, there's 2 coming up that I'm going to go out and film. So that excites me because
so you do have a couple more things that I'm sure you probably can't really talk about it yet, but
but you find that if you do a good job, are respectful. I try to be patient, try to be directed when I need to be. It usually begets more work, and I have a lot of fun doing it. And I think people can sense when you enjoy doing something.
Oh, for sure.
I've been with some people that you've seen on TV for years. They're disgusted. They don't want to be there. It's a drag. When I walk in, I'm like a kid on their first day of school. What's this? What's a best boy? What's a grip? I hope I never lose that. I don't want to get stuck in that business. I don't want to get to a point where I'm like, this is getting old. It's not. It's not. And I still love it very much. So for those of you watching, I want to keep doing it.
Yeah. So, and he's available, guys. Like,
the goal is though, to get to a place. I have a couple of ideas that I want to do not on my own, but be a part of moving forward. So we have some show ideas and we've done some pitches.
Some things you're working on?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Well, we'll save those for next time.
Right. Okay. You got it.
And I mean, I know it's only been like just over a year, but it feels like it's been longer. I don't know why. Like, again, like your episode, the last one you're on, it's only been a little bit over a year and a few months maybe, but for some reason I just feel like it's been much longer. I know we've talked a lot in between.
Oh yeah, but it does feel like it was longer. We were talking about that today. I know when it came on, I know when we taped it. So listen, it won't go. If you'll have me back, it won't be that long again.
Right. Yeah. And last time too, I forget if I said it earlier when we first started, but for those listening, and if you haven't already probably looked on my channel or whatever, or just Googled or went on YouTube, but you were episode 187 was your previous one. And the timing of that one, obviously, for those that don't know, 187 obviously is
it's a murder code. It's a murder statute.
That's right. Yeah. And totally unplanned. And when it just kind of fell in line that way. And the weird part is when Europe, we were talking about it, like we had recorded, I think at the end of 20, it was really like a month or two before the end of 2023. And then for some reason, again, schedule wise, it just kind of, I had a schedule where a couple people got moved around, whatever. And I didn't even realize it. And then all of a sudden yours landed at 187. And I was just like, that's weird. I was like, I can't change that now. It's just the way that it worked out. And I couldn't believe
Whenever
it.
I hear 187, I don't think murder, I think Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
One of his hits was 187, but we're not going to say the rest of the line.
Right.
I mean, that's ironic. So we'll see where it lands this time.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we don't have it was a one-time thing. We can't. I don't think we could.
So I hear that. I think Bill found 186 more people more interesting to talk to before he talked to me. God bless you. Congratulations.
Yeah. So offline, you're gonna have to give me some more of those recommendations.
You got it.
I need a couple characters.
Well,
you know?
I got them. I told you. I have a slew of them. So and recommendations, and you always do a great job. So continue to enjoy the show and learn from your guests.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to check out, where can they find you?
So Primetime Crime is our YouTube channel. Check it out. We do the show live every week, usually on Wednesdays or as close as we can get. And that's the YouTube channel. I have one more episode of New York Homicide coming out this year, so it'll be out in April. And I usually post on my Facebook page when something's coming up, and the algorithm shadow bans it down. And
of course.
5 people see it, unless I pay for it. But we usually on our show always say when Lauren has something, she does a lot of documentaries too, or I have something coming up. So
cool. Well, always a pleasure, man.
You too, man. Likewise.
And so looking forward to that book. And hopefully you finish it up.
When I come back, it better be sitting here. We'll get it done.
Yeah. Well, how about this? You're not coming back.
Right.
How about that?
If not, we'll just put a book here that looks.
Yeah, we'll pretend. Yeah, we'll pretend. I'll flip through something over here.
Right.
Like, hey, Jared, page 47. What were you talking about? Yeah.
And we saved some stories for the book. Don't worry.
Absolutely. All right. Jarrett Ferentino on the Stacks and Loop Internet Studio. Thanks for joining me. If you want to see more On the Stacks content, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/onthestackspodcast or search the hashtag OnTheStacks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.